Hey, it's Sober Without God, and today I want to talk to you about the room where it happens, what really happens inside most churches. And there's a metaphor to describe this. It's called finding out how the sausage is made. Whether you're an exvangelical or a Christian or an atheist or someone who isn't sure what you are, this affects you. We are seeing in the church in America infiltrate and force Christianity into just about every sphere of life. And we will talk today about what happens behind closed doors in American churches and what we can do about it. So, another way to say it is it's the room where it happens inside these churches. This year, I went to go visit my daughter down in Florida, and we got to see the play Hamilton. I'd never seen it before, but there's one particular song inside the play Hamilton, and it's called "The Room Where It Happens," and it is sung by the actor playing Aaron Burr. He wanted to be in conversations in government where the big decisions are being made. And by the way, I loved Hamilton. It was fantastic. What an amazing play. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the room where it happens. I also want to warn you that this video might bring up some religious trauma for some viewers or remind you of some negative church experiences. So just please be aware. I want to say that my experiences come from my point of view. I am not a qualified health care professional when it comes to substance abuse or religious trauma. And if you need help, I will leave some links below if you're dealing with either issue. I was a Southern Baptist pastor for 10 years, so I have been in the room where it happens. And I had explained to me like this. I used to work in a restaurant, and being in the room where it happens, it's like being in the restaurant, but then getting to go back in the kitchen and see how your food is made. And I remember when I had my first waiting tables job, the first time I stepped back into the kitchen and I saw how the food was made, and I saw the cook making steaks, and he picked up a piece of cheese off of a hamburger that he was making and he spit under it. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, this burger's for Bubba." I said, "You mean Bubba, the guy that washes dishes?" He said, "Yeah, I don't like him very much." I said, "It doesn't matter. Shouldn't be spitting in his burger." But you get the idea. Once in a while, we get to see what goes on inside the kitchen of the restaurants we dine at. A couple of years ago, I went through a major shift and I left the faith. But that shift started way back when I was in seminary. And I got more cynical as time went on. But my doubts started when I was in seminary. And as I became a pastor, my doubts continued. You may find yourself in a position today where you are doubting your faith as a Christian, and you may even be in a position of ministry, but I want you to know that you are definitely not alone. I finally left the faith after I got sober and I read through the Bible one more time. There is a link to one of my videos that I talk about my experience. Let's talk about what happens behind closed doors in most churches. For those of you who grew up in church, some of this may not be a shock, especially if you were a pastor's kid. The headlines today are filled with stories of sexual cover-ups and financial abuse and misdeeds in churches all across our world, but that's not what I want to focus on today. We should be mindful of these things, however, because we always need to watch over those who have positions of authority, especially in the church. I want to focus on the minister's daily tasks and what goes on behind closed doors in the room where it happens and how it affects us. And I want to talk about how it affects the common church member and how it leaks out into public at large. What are they doing in there anyway? What goes on when the happy family Sunday worship time is not happening? If you've ever seen an episode of The Righteous Gemstones, it may look something like that. But that is, of course, slightly exaggerated for television, or maybe it's not. I also want to ask you to do me a favor. If you're enjoying any of my videos, hit the like and subscribe button. It just takes 2 seconds to hit that like button, and also leave me a comment. If you're really enjoying the video, I would really appreciate it. It'll help my tiny little channel grow just a little bit more. Running a church is like running any other business. It's like running a car dealership or a restaurant, a retail store. Everyone has their best face on when a visitor comes to visit and when clients are around. But when it's just the employees, the real talk starts. And I had someone tell me one time, if you ever want to know what a church is really like, don't go visit them on Sunday morning. Go visit them on a Wednesday night. Better yet, go visit them on the night that they have a business meeting. And if you've ever sat through a Baptist business meeting, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When they're arguing about money, that's when you should go visit a church and find out what they're really about. Then you'll see what those people are really like. But it's true, a church isn't really a special, sanctified, holy place. It's just a building filled with imperfect human beings who believe they've been called together by a mandate from an invisible deity who has brought them together in spirit and in truth. But when it comes time to discuss business or things that are conflicting, they suddenly can get angry at a moment's notice, and they cannot agree on what color the new carpet should be, or how to build the new sanctuary, or how much money they should spend on child's crafts for vacation Bible school. And sometimes, if the issue is serious enough, then or money is involved, it can split a denomination right down the middle. And that's exactly what you've seen in the last few months. It's Southern Baptists with women in leadership, or the United Methodist Church and LGBTQ rights. When pastors get together and talk amongst themselves, it can get even worse. When you have pastors meeting together and discussing issues, especially with large church ministers. And I'm going to talk about the difference between large church ministers and small church ministers. But large church ministers will talk completely different than small church ministers. And if you sit around and you hear them talk about their church members or brag about how big their churches are, I've heard this firsthand. And when they sit around a table, or they'll go out to a restaurant, or they'll have a little pastors meeting, and they'll brag about how much money they're bringing in, or how many baptisms they had, or how many souls they saved this week. They will talk about those things until they're blue in the faith, and they'll brag about it to each other, and they'll try to one up each other, and they'll just keep going on and on and on. That's how they talk behind closed doors. That's how they talk inside the room where it happens. Outside of those meetings, when you meet them and when they shake your hand after the service, or you see them out in public, they will appear to be the most humble man of God. And this isn't every large church pastor, and I want to give that disclaimer. That's not every single pastor in the world, but there are a lot of ministers that are like this. When they shake your hand, they're humble, but when they're talking to each other and they're talking shop, it's a completely different story. These pastors are guys who pastor these huge, large churches, and they have absolutely no shame behind closed doors. And listen to them talk about such sensitive matters in a casual, offhanded way is something that only takes place in that room where it happens. The worst part of that behavior is it does not reflect the ideals of a lot of small church ministers. A lot of small church ministers, they are hustling, and they are out there doing hard work, and they're making differences in people's lives on a one-on-one basis. Many small church pastors are worn out, and they're exhausted, underpaid, and overworked like the rest of the population. And it may sound crazy coming from an atheist to defend ministers, but a lot of these guys just don't stop to think about their belief system, and they don't stop to think about what they're doing or what they believe, but they are out there trying to feed the hungry, and they're out there trying to clothe people, and they're trying to meet basic daily needs of individuals in their small communities. And many of them get overused, and people take their frustrations out on the ministers about the smallest things. I know one pastor who was a small church pastor who used to get dirty phone calls and dirty texts from one of his mentally ill parishioners. And what do you do with that? I've known many small church pastors who felt like they were talked down to by people in the church the people in the church had all the money, and they were the ones who felt like they were the big donors in the church. And they felt like they should be making the big decisions in the church, and the pastor ought to do this or the pastor ought to do that. And if they didn't, then they would just take their money elsewhere. There are ministers I also know personally who are atheists. And after years of study of scripture and years of cynicism and years of just not believing anymore, and or some of them, their faith is just hanging on by the tiniest thread, and years of ministry have absolutely broken them down. But they feel like they just can't leave, because that's the only thing they know how to do is be a minister. And they don't feel like there's another route for them to go. And so they stay in the ministry. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in the room where it happens. So what can we do? If you're watching this video, what can we do about this difficult situation? If you're a minister in a bad situation, or if you're confused and you feel hopeless, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. Or if you've been scarred by religion, or if you've been hurt by religious trauma, you can also go to recoveringfromreligion.org or clergyproject.org if you are a member of the clergy. Both those are great places to start, and the links are listed below and also in the section below. If you're an exvangelical like me, I encourage you to keep all of this in mind if you ever talk to a church member or minister. They may be angry or they may push you away, but show a little bit of kindness when you engage them, because they may be more willing to discuss doubts than you realize. Are you affected by decisions in the room where it happens? Yes, because these things are going to affect us on a national level as well. Always know that the finished, polished project that you see on television or online or in person is not what's going on behind closed doors. And I will see you next time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.